Now, science has just found that out in just the last decade or so, confirming. But what's transpiring right here is something to do with that. What it is, I don't know. But I do know in reading in Matthew 24, Jesus said, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. Something so traumatic is happening back down on the earth that literally the world is thrown. In Scripture at this point says men's hearts will fail them for fear as they're seeing what is coming on the earth. Now, at this point, it says in verse 15, the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman and every free man hid themselves in dens and rocks of the mountains. And they said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne. Now, here's a phrase you haven't heard yet. And from the wrath of the what? Does that make sense? Well, guess what? The Lamb is going to start having an expression that the world describes this way: for the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? At this point, folks, the world for its first time has to admit this awesome God is shaking our world. And they're scared stinking to death. They're begging that something would kill them off because they're scared of what they're seeing happen to the earth. Now, we're only at the 6th seal, and all of a sudden, there's a pause. Kind of seems like God's nature. And you're going to find this, there's 3 sets of 7 judgments. We're going to see these 7 seals, and then we're going to see 7 trumpets, and we're going to see 7 bowls, vials that are broken, that's poured out. But in every single case, right after the 6th one, there's a pause. God pushes the pause button and says, you know what? I'm still God of grace. I'm still God of mercy. I'm going to give you guys a little breather, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to hit you again. You ever did that to your kids when you're whipping them? Well, what happens here is very important. We get to chapter 7, and the Bible talks about these 4 angels that says, stop everything. The 4 winds stop. Everything stops for a minute because God's going to throw in a little parentheses right here. And it says in verse 2, and I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, and he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. Now, by the time we get to the end of this message tonight, we're going to talk about another seal on the foreheads, but it's going to be the bad guy seal. But before it gets to that point, God's going to put his seal. Now, this is very interesting because this involves 144,000 Jews. Matter of fact, it's so explicit that it names 12,000 Jews in their levels of their tribes. 12,000 from Judah and Reuben, Gad, Asher, all the way down, these 12 tribes, they're going to be sealed. They have a special calling. They're going to be missionary evangelists. See, the church is gone. Everything now is focused back on the Jews. God's sealing these Jews, and there's more into it. Believe me, I'm skipping the major parts. You can, just hitting the major parts. You can get much more detail if you take time to read it. But he's going to use these Jews, these 12,000 of every 12 tribe, to preach the gospel. And as a result of it, it tells us in chapter 7 and verse 9 that I beheld, and lo, a great multitude which no man could number. Now watch this. Of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues stood before the throne and before the Lamb. Now watch this, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands. You remember the group that first showed up with white robes? They had crowns, didn't they? These guys don't have any crowns. They've got the palm branch, which is a symbol of what happened when Jesus came into the city of Jerusalem. They were using the palm branch, and they laid it down before him. It's a symbol of gratitude and thanksgiving, of salvation. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, "Salvation to our God, which sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb." Now, we've skipped that chapter. That's the highlights of that. You have to take time to read more detail. Out of the tribulation comes a great number that no man can number that will become saved. Now we get to seal number 7, and watch closely what it says. Chapter 8, verse 1. And when he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of a half an hour, which to me proves beyond doubt that women will not make it to heaven. What? What? No, it's a joke. It's a joke. A bad joke, I know. Forgive me, Lord. Silence in heaven for a half an hour. That's the only time that's the quietest heaven's ever going to be. And the reason why it's going to be quiet is because, folks, we're getting ready to go into phase 2. And nobody's thrilled about that, especially the Lord. Chapter 8, verse 2, and I saw 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. Verse 6 says, and the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. Remember we told you to keep looking for these 7s throughout Revelation? Here's some examples of this. Now, we are still in the first segment of the tribulation. We're somewhere possibly in the 3rd year maybe. It has been miserable on earth. Some people say, well, I'm just going to wait and see if this rapture stuff really happens. If it happens, I'll get saved. Well, good luck to you, buddy. By the way, if you're having a hard time living for God right now, you sure ain't going to make it during that time. But here's what's interesting. Each one of these trumpets are sounded, and once again, great judgment falls. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood. Anybody remember that in the book of Exodus? And they were cast upon the earth, and the 3rd part of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. Al Gore finally got his way. Verse 8, the 2nd angel sounded, and as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the 3rd part of the sea became blood. What's going on here? Something traumatic is happening. Some say, well, this could be something that has to do with what was in that particular meteor or whatever. Actually, I've heard some people describe this maybe as a volcano when it talks about a burning mountain. But regardless, it's going to hit the sea, and it's unique. And I kind of lean more to the fact that it's something coming from outside the earth domain, and it hits the sea, the salt water, and the 3rd part of the sea become blood. And the 3rd part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and the 3rd part of the ships were destroyed. Then, verse 10 says, and the 3rd angel sounded, and there was a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the 3rd part of the rivers. Now it's the fresh water, and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called wormwood. And the 3rd part of the waters became wormwood. In case you don't know, that's a very strong poison.